That is why you had the stocks building up. And most of the subsidy was going more and more towards the cost of holding the stocks alone. So what do the liberalizers then turn around and say? They say the PDS is not working. And the cost of holding stocks is too high. The food subsidy is too high. Well, you are responsible for it. So this is the sad thing, that a problem which has been created by neoliberal policies is then turned around, and a dismantling of the PDS is being advocated by the people who are responsible for the malfunctioning of the PDS itself.
Ramadas' family was relatively well off. Gradually, the family lost their property and land towards paying off debts for buying seeds and fertilizers. This has been the fate of many small farmers under the new economic regime.
ఇప్పుడు ఆస్తి అంతా ఎందుకు అమ్ముకున్నావమ్మా?
మా తండ్రి ఆయన తండ్రి వాడాడు, మా అత్తమ్మ గట్టినే పానం వాడే. ఇక్కడ 2 ఏళ్ళ దాకా ఇట్లా కోసపడ్డారు. ఇక భక్తులు పెట్టిన బిడ్డ రాయికద్ద బాగా అనిపిస్తుంది, ఉండేది కాదు. ఇక ఎక్కడో వెళ్ళిపోయింది. అది బాధ కాదు బిడ్డ, భూమి మీద లేని బతుకు పెట్టినాను. 13 నెలలు పోయిందే కోసపడ్డా. ఈ బాగా చాలా ఉన్ననాడు ఇచ్చిండు, లేకుండా బాధ చాలా ఇచ్చి ఇలా తీసుకోమన్నాడు. నా కష్టం చల్లకుండా వెళ్ళి చచ్చిపోతున్నా. 13 నెలలు కోసపడ్డా బియ్యం లేక, కంట్రోల్ లేకున్నా బదిలాకుండా ఇంట్లో బియ్యం తీసుకొచ్చుకున్నా. దగ్గర తినే బియ్యం కూడా మా ఆడు అడ్డ తీసుకొచ్చుకున్నా, స్టార్ట్ చేసుకున్నా.
The story of starvation amidst plenty is the same, only characters and the locations change. The stark gap between the rich and the poor in India today is sharper than ever before. It is, however, visible to only those eyes that wish to feel it. The attractions of low-interest car loans and housing loans have no meaning for millions with no stable incomes. For their lives, the greatest challenge is arranging the evening meal. It was in such a scenario that the Supreme Court of India's intervention brought a ray of hope. Many who felt strongly about the state of affairs approached the court, the upholder of the Constitution that believes every Indian to be equal before the law.
When we went to the Supreme Court in 2001, there was a feeling of despair in the people's movement. Nothing can be done. We are a poor country. We can't help it. We have to live with starvation. We have to live with malnourishment. The case in the Supreme Court changed all that. And I must say it was the attitude of Chief Justice Kirpal who set the ball rolling. When government said we had no money to implement the schemes, Chief Justice Kirpal said, I remember this vividly, he said, cut the flab somewhere else. Either you do it or I'll tell you how to do it. Cut the flab somewhere else. And by a series of stunning orders, the Supreme Court reinstated the midday meal scheme. The Supreme Court said that the Anganwadi centers should be doubled from 6 lakh centers to 12 lakh centers. The Supreme Court began an investigation into corruption in the public distribution system and strengthened the system of ration shops. The Supreme Court reinforced the scheme, the Annapurna scheme, where old people get a sack of grain every month. The Supreme Court said pensions to old people should be paid by the 7th of each month. The Supreme Court said that there should be a food for work program, and questioned the government and said, what's happened to the right to work in this country? Should you not have a statute? And ultimately, as you know, now we have the Employment Guarantee Act. And the Supreme Court said, you must implement the maternity benefit scheme where poor women got 500 rupees for every childbirth. That is what the Supreme Court did. It reinforced the notion that food security for poor people is mandatory in India, and the government cannot say, we have no money, we have no funds, we have no resources. It's not acceptable. They must implement the food security scheme in the country.
अभी 1 साल हुआ। अभी यहाँ कार्ड पे आपको क्या क्या मिलता है? 2000 साल में मिला। 2000 अभी यहाँ कार्ड पे आपको क्या क्या नहीं मिला है?
कुछ नहीं मिलता है, राशन तो नहीं देता है, खाली घासलेट देता है बस। राशन हम लोग आज मिलेगा कल मिलेगा, बहुत तड़प रहा है लेकिन मिलता ही नहीं है। 1 तारीख को देगा, 2 तारीख को देगा,
6 तारीख को देगा,
अगला महीना में देगा।
कुछ मिलने के लिए कुछ कोशिश किया था?
बहुत कोशिश किया।
क्या क्या किया आपने?
आजाद मैदान में मोर्चे लेके गया, उधर बड़ा ऑफिस का उधर मीटिंग लेके गया। हम लोग पूछेगा तो देगा, ये महीने में देगा, अगला महीने में देगा, ऊपर से आर्डर आना मांगते हैं।
देखो सुप्रीम कोर्ट का जो आदेश था कि बेघर लोगों को कार्ड मिलना चाहिए, वो हिसाब से हमने महाराष्ट्र सरकार के पे हम लोग नहीं किया, तो महाराष्ट्र सरकार तो परिपत्रक निकाला, कल इसकी अमलबजावनी नहीं हुआ। इसलिए हम रेशनिंग पूर्ति समिति से तरफ से हम लोग हाई कोर्ट में, बॉम्बे हाई कोर्ट में हम लोग वो केस दाखिल किया। उसके बाद उन्हें 2 अक्टूबर के लिए उन लोग को तुरंत एक कार्ड देना चालू किया। 2 अक्टूबर से आज तक एक कार्ड के ऊपर कुछ अनाज नहीं, कुछ दिया गया नहीं, खाली कार्ड दिए, कोर्ट के आदेश के तरफ से कार्ड दिए, पर उसके ऊपर अनाज है वो अनाज दिया गया नहीं।
First of all, it's very, very difficult for people to get BPL cards. Even when BPL cards are given, the government says, the officers of the government say that look, we have a quota. We have a quota, for instance, 500 for Bombay. Okay, we have finished our quota. Now any more BPL cards we can't give, because otherwise it will appear as if in Bombay a lot of people are very poor. Okay, so they go by quotas, they don't go by actual poverty. And if you don't go by actual poverty and go by quota, then the people who are actually deserving of getting cheap grain will not be able to get it, because they don't have those cards.
BPL list is very unreliable, that has been established in many places. Many poor people are excluded from the list because the methodology is fundamentally flawed and is also not appropriately applied. So I would be in favor of abolishing this BPL approach and having a universal system based on self-selection, whereby people decide for themselves whether they want to use the PDS.
It's not merely government giving employment, it is also government giving us an economy that gives everybody work and food. Now that's the direction that the Right to Food campaign at the moment is taking.
High Court passes orders after orders after orders, and still children keep on dying. The government every time comes up with some beautiful affidavits, which are some 80 pages and 100 pages as to how they have implemented the orders. But when you talk to people at the ground level, when you talk to NGOs, you realize that not one order has been implemented.
The exhilarating feeling of a full belly still eludes millions. Complexities have increased, as despite having their entitlements clearly spelt out, the benefits that were to follow are nowhere visible in their lives. Nourishing food, essential to assert the right to survival, is being denied. Millions of invisible Indians are forced to die a slow death as they are eating less and less. Today, an average Indian consumes a mere 155 kilograms of food every year. This is exactly what she was consuming at the time of independence. An Indian today eats half of what an average Chinese eats. If you are lucky to be born in Europe, you may be eating 4 times more than an Indian. The average American eats 6 times more than an Indian. Once again, the poor have been shortchanged. 100 days of work at approved minimum wages have been promised, for which they were to be paid in grain and money. Again, there was the proverbial slip between the cup and the lip. Machines cornered the employment opportunities, and the food got lost in scams, often finding its way out illegally to neighboring countries.
The public distribution system and also in the SDRY, which is the employment scheme, there are many delivery issues, and wherever we go we find that there are problems. But the state governments have not been able to sort out these issues. For instance, I found that machines are being used and workers' names are written in employment schemes, but wages are not being paid to them. because work is being done by machine. So the bogus, large number of bogus names are entered.
पलामू जिले में और एक मजेदार खेल निकला कि वहाँ ऐसे कुछ मशहूर थे पलामू से जहाँ लेफ्ट हैंड साइड में लोगों का नाम लिखा है और राइट हैंड साइड में उनका अंगूठा और हस्ताक्षर और बीच में खाली वो बाद में मस्जिद वो बड़े तो 10 वो